Thank you for watching today's Critical Thought, your daily bite-sized discussion of game design, courtesy of GameWisdom.com. Hello everybody, this is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Welcome to today's Critical Thought. Thank you to 719 subscribers here on YouTube. Hope you're enjoying the content. If you want to vote for the next big Let's Play on the channel, be sure to check out the Critical Thought on 700 subscribers and channel reward. As of right now, when I'm recording, there is currently a three-way tie between the Mega Man Retro, the horror play, and the random play or the random game of Hitman. As I said, you have until Sunday, October 2nd at midnight, and that's when I'll tally the votes. If there's still a tie, we'll go with a sudden death option. We'll see whoever votes first on any of the three, that will be the winner. So be sure to head over there and check that out. For today's Critical Thought, we are talking puzzle design. Puzzles, much like difficulty, are one of those very subjective topics because everyone has their own different interpretation of a good or bad puzzle. For me especially, I have played a lot of adventure games and I've been stumped by a lot of them as well. To give you a case in point, when I played Yuru, which was the Myst game back in the day, I basically had to rely on the full-on spoiler for each of those puzzle solutions because they weren't going to come otherwise. When it comes to puzzle design, there are essentially two schools of thought or philosophy when it comes to building a puzzle and designing it. There is real-world logic, and then there's in-game or fantasy logic. We'll talk about that more in a minute, but to get everyone on the same page, when it comes to any puzzle game that you can imagine, be it the old Zork and King's Quest to modern day, with stuff like the logic games from Professor Layton, and even a lot of indie adventure games that are being released, like The Longest Journey and the Kickstarter version of that, there are three elements that essentially define any puzzle. And it goes back to the old analogy of a lock and a key lock and a door. The door represents what you're trying to achieve. Am I trying to get a soda out of a vending can? Am I trying to get past a guard? Am I literally trying to open up a door? That's essentially is what that represents. The lock is what's stopping you. For a vending machine, is it that I need money? Is that guard essentially going to track me and stop me if I get too close? Am I trying to slay a dragon to rescue a princess? These are all elements that are getting in your way. And then the third part is obviously the key. This is the solution. What am I going to use to get past this? With the vending machine, do I just use a quarter? Can I throw a distraction at the guard so I can slip by? Do I use the mythical sword Excalibur to slay the dragon? But when it comes to any puzzle, you have to think about those three elements. And depending upon your game and what you're building from a design point of view, you can have different means or different ways around this. Some adventure games basically give you a wide world. So the space could have all the keys that you need, and even keys for other puzzles, but you just never know until you use it. And that leads to the classic adventure game logic of just throwing random stuff and seeing what happens. Does this ball of yarn work? No. How about this rake? How about this pile of gold? How about this magic spell? How about this rubber chicken? And so on. What makes puzzle design so interesting is again that because they are being developed by an actual designer, it can lead to very different puzzles depending upon who is building the game. And that's where those two schools of thought come in. Whether it's a real-world puzzle or a fantasy or in-game puzzle. We'll start with real-world. When we refer to a real-world puzzle, we're talking about a puzzle that's requiring outside knowledge or real-world knowledge to solve. For instance, let's say a puzzle that requires you to understand the three phases of matter, or understanding astrology, or mapping, cartography, or stenciling, or anything like that. These are puzzles where there is knowledge that's not in game that you need to understand to solve them. We can also, in some sense, group logic-based puzzles, such as the Professor Layton series here, because they are working on real-world knowledge. But they're working within from essentially just critical thinking, so it can be its own thing. Real-world puzzles typically are more popular, especially from developers, because they're essentially using what they know in terms of building this puzzle. If a game developer is an expert musician, it'll be easy for them to design a puzzle around reading sheet music or understanding tones. If someone's good at art, we could have a drawing puzzle. Anything like that. Now, the main disadvantages, though, are what can stop a lot of people from playing these games. The first one is, whenever you are basing your game on outside knowledge, you run the risk of alienating your fans and confusing them as well. We all have different knowledge bases. Anyone who's watched Archer knows about how esoteric someone's knowledge can be. But when it comes to video games, the more outside elements you require on the player, the more you risk that they may not be able to solve it. Just like with difficulty, puzzle solving and our own knowledge is subjective. I'll give you an example for me. I am horrible when it comes to any kind of music-based puzzles or rhythm. If your game requires me to listen to tones or read sheet music, I can't do it. Back in the day, Super Mario RPG, there was a section where you had to press the button to the rhythm of the music to get Yoshi to win a race. I could never solve that puzzle. I could beat the final optional super secret boss like it was nothing, but that one thing stopped me. And that has existed to this day. If your game has a music puzzle in it, I can't solve it. I have to turn to a walkthrough to figure that one out. The other problem with real-world logic-based puzzles is what happens, or what's called, getting into the developer's head, where it's less about you solving this puzzle and more about you just trying to figure out what the hell was the developer thinking when he was trying to come up with this. And a lot of classic adventure games run into this problem, where they'll have real-world items and you have to MacGyver them in order to solve the puzzle. But it just makes like no damn sense. The infamous puzzle when you have to put a syrup-soaked mustache on a cat to get a proper fake ID. I think this was from Gabriel Knight, to fool a guard, has stumped many players and probably driven a few people insane. Now, when I spoke with adventure game designers Ron Gilbert and Gary Winnick a few months ago, or I should say 2 years ago, wow, it's been a while, we talked about puzzle design. And they both felt that the best puzzles are those that are built within the settings or rules of the game. And that's where the second category comes in. Puzzles that are built within the fantasy or the lore of the world itself. And this can be so many different puzzle games. Be it the strange puzzles of Resident Evil and Silent Hill, to games like Portal or the Talos Principle, and of course our example up there, Space Chem from Zachtronics. These are puzzle experiences where you aren't really using outside knowledge, but you're more or less using the lore or the rules of the world to solve these puzzles. Portal being a brilliant example. We don't have portal guns in real life. So instead we have to make use of the in-game lore and the in-game rules to solve these puzzles. Now, of course, there is real-world elements to it in the use of physics as a governing force of motion, but it's more about using the portals and understanding how to manipulate them to get through these puzzles. Space Chem is another major example. For those of you who haven't played that game, it's a game about combining elements that's really more about command-based programming. and the building blocks of understanding programming logic. It's also a game that if I play for more than 20 minutes, I can feel my brain overheating and smoke coming out of my ears. Now, even though that game is using real-world logic in the form of the programming solutions and programming logic, it's still all built within its own internal rule set and laws. And that's what makes it a lot easier to understand. If Space Chem was just literally trying to do programming, it would be a lot harder for people to comprehend compared to that example. When Zachtronics did TIS 100, which is literally about assembly line programming, they built their own pseudocode assembly language to help players understand it and build it. When it comes to fantasy puzzles or fiction-based logic, it is harder to come up with because of the fact that you have to define the rules of this world. You can't just rely on people knowing these things. They have to be explained in the game, they have to be referenced, and more importantly, once you've established rules, you cannot go back on them. And I'll give you an example. Let's say we're in a fantasy world that when I yell out Marco Polo really loud, I can command rubber chickens to do my bidding, and they'll fly around, and basically I control them through my mind. If we establish that as a rule of your game, let's say we have a puzzle where there is an object dangling or, teeter-tottering on a ledge somewhere up here. If that's the case, one of the solutions should be I could yell out Marco Polo and tell my rubber chicken to fly up there and knock it down. But let's say you as a developer instead say, we're going to have the solution be I have to put toothpaste on a cat to go up to a window of a dentist, so the dentist smells the toothpaste and instinctively runs out the door, slamming the door, causing things to shake to cause the object to fall off its ledge. If any developer has actually created that puzzle, I would just like to say screw you for all the players who probably got stuck on that. Excuse me. But as we've seen, games where the puzzle solving is built into the lore are generally easier to solve. And another example of that would be the Blackwell series from Watch It Eye Games. The game takes place within the real world, but you're dealing with this fantasy element of having a ghost on your side. And your ghost ally has unique rules. He cannot physically engage with any object in the game, but he can make wind blow, or he can basically create like a gust. So what they do is, yes, this is a real world setting, you're dealing with real world objects, but you have the fiction of the world that is guiding you to solve these puzzles rather than using real world logic, in the sense of using realistic thoughts and strategies. So we're going to wrap things up in like the next minute or so. But with puzzle design, as I've said, some of my favorite puzzles have been built on their own rule set or their own internal logic. Very recently, one of my favorite games would be the Talos Principle from Crow Team. Also, the Swapper as well. It is harder to design puzzles around an internal world's own logic, but if you get that right, it can really make your game fascinating to play. Now, one last thing about that. When you're building it around unique mechanics or rule sets, it does limit how many puzzles you can have. You can only do so much if you're limiting yourself to, let's say, one mechanic, like the portal gun. Whereas with a adventure game that's built in real world logic, we can have puzzles about everything. We could have a geometry puzzle. We have a puzzle about Napoleonic warfare tactics, or ancient Aztec gods, you name it. But as a final point, regardless of whether your puzzles are real world or fantasy based, they should always have some kind of in-game reference. There should be something in-game to help the player understand what's going on. With a music-based puzzle, for instance, if you want me to read sheet music, have like a beginner's guide to sheet music somewhere. If your puzzle is about Aztec gods, Maybe there'll be a display about the various guides or a book I can pick up. Anything in-game to help the player learn is better than just naturally assuming they're going to understand this. With in-game fiction rules, the same thing goes as well. Don't just have an item do something because you say will do it. Establish that as the rules. If I can walk on fire if I put bananas on my feet, then have someone do that in the game so I know that's an option. Don't just have a puzzle solution that literally you would never guess in a million years because the game never referenced it. And for those of you watching this, if you have any examples of really good or really bad puzzle design, be sure to let me know in the comments below. But that's going to do it for today's Critical Thought. Thanks so much for watching, and thank you to subscribing up there. Again, be sure to vote for the next Let's Play. You have until, again, midnight, October 2nd. Otherwise, we'll go into sort of a sudden death mode and see who wins out. Be sure to check out game-wisdom.com. And, of course, check out our Patreon campaign. And other than that, we're going to wrap it up here. Once again, I'm Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Thanks for watching today's Critical Thought, and I will see you all tomorrow. Take care. Thanks for watching the video, everybody. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment, of course, share with your friends. It always helps out. Check out game-wisdom.com, where I examine the art and science of games. You can follow me on Twitch and Twitter under GW Bycer for the latest updates of new content. And be sure to check out our Patreon campaign. You can find us on Patreon under Game Wisdom if you would like to donate and help contribute to keeping Game Wisdom going. Your donations can not only give us the monthly funding we need to keep supporting ourselves, but if we can hit some goals, it will mean more great content for you, and there are some nifty little rewards there as well. Thanks again for watching this video, and be sure to tune into the next one real soon.